You're trying to build something, change your life, become who you know you can be. But when you look around for support, encouragement, guidance, there's nothing. No mentor showing you the way, no community cheering you on, no family believing in you. Just you, alone, trying to figure it out while everyone else seems to have the support you're missing. Carl Jung would say, "This isn't your disadvantage, it's your initiation." The people who get ahead without external support don't succeed despite being alone. They succeed because being alone forced them to develop something most people never access, a relationship with their own self. Jung discovered that the individuals who achieve the most profound transformation are often those who had no choice but to do it alone. Not because loneliness is noble, but because external support can actually prevent you from developing the internal resources that real success requires. I'm about to share Jung's framework for getting ahead when no one is there for you. Not positive thinking or manifestation, but psychological strategies that turn your isolation into your greatest advantage. If you're alone in your journey, Jung would say, perfect. You're exactly where you need to be to access power most people never find. Here's what Jung understood that changes everything. Most people never develop their full potential because they have too much external support. Family that cushions failure, friends that validate mediocrity, mentors that give them shortcuts, communities that provide belonging without requiring growth. This support feels helpful, but it actually prevents the crisis that forces real development. You think you're disadvantaged because you don't have these supports, but Jung would say, you're about to develop something they never will, the ability to move forward using only internal resources. And that ability is the difference between people who succeed temporarily and people who succeed sustainably. External support is conditional. It requires you to meet expectations, maintain approval, stay within acceptable boundaries. The moment you deviate from what your supporters want, the support disappears. You're not really supported, you're managed. And that management prevents you from discovering your authentic path. But when you have no external support, you're forced to develop what Jung called the relationship with the self. The ability to access guidance, strength, and direction from your own psyche. This relationship is unconditional. It doesn't disappear when you fail. It doesn't judge your choices. It doesn't require you to be anything other than authentic. And once you develop it, you become unstoppable. Jung knew this from experience. His break with Freud left him professionally isolated. No mentor, no community, no institutional support. Just him, alone, trying to develop his ideas while everyone thought he'd lost his mind. That isolation forced him to develop an internal relationship with his unconscious that became the foundation of all his work. He didn't succeed despite being alone. He succeeded because being alone forced him to develop resources he couldn't have accessed while relying on external support. This is your opportunity, not your obstacle. Jung's first brutal truth. If you're waiting for the support to show up before you start moving forward, you'll wait forever. Not because you're unworthy of support, but because the support you need doesn't exist outside you. It never did. And the sooner you accept this, the sooner you can access what actually works. Most people stall their lives waiting for conditions that will never arrive. The mentor who will show them the way. The partner who will believe in them. The friend group that'll support their growth. The family that'll finally understand. They're waiting for external validation to give them permission to pursue what they already know they need to pursue. But Jung discovered, external support rarely appears before success. It appears after. People support winners, not strivers. They validate the successful, not the struggling. If you wait for support to begin, you'll never begin because the support only comes to those who've already proven they don't need it. One of Jung's patients, a woman trying to leave an abusive marriage, kept waiting for her family to support her decision. Session after session, she'd say, "Once they understand, once they approve, then I'll leave." Jung finally told her, "They will never give you permission to do what threatens their comfort. If you wait for their support, you'll wait until you're dead. You must act from your own authority, not theirs." She was devastated but eventually understood. She left without their approval. The family rejected her initially, but years later, after she'd rebuilt her life successfully, some reconciled. The support came after she proved she didn't need it, not before. This is the pattern Jung saw constantly. People wait for support that will never come at the crucial moment when they most need to act. The support might come later, after success, but it's never there at the beginning when it would actually help. So waiting for it is waiting to fail. But here's what's liberating about this truth. Once you accept that no one is coming to save you, help you, or support you, you stop wasting energy on waiting. You stop performing for approval. You stop explaining yourself to people who'll never understand. You stop seeking permission from those who'll never grant it. And you redirect all that energy into actually moving forward. Jung called this the acceptance of existential aloneness, the recognition that you came into this world alone and you'll leave alone. And everything meaningful you do will be done from that fundamental solitude. This isn't depression, it's liberation. Because once you stop expecting external support, you stop being disappointed by its absence. You stop feeling victimized by your isolation. You stop waiting and you start moving. Here's the practice Jung would give you. Every time you catch yourself thinking, "If only I had a mentor, this support, that help, then I could move forward." Recognize that thought as the ego avoiding action. The truth is, you're avoiding action because it's scary, and you're using the absence of support as an excuse. Stop waiting, start moving. The support you need exists within you, and you'll only discover it by acting without external validation. Jung's second insight inverts your disadvantage. Being alone isn't your weakness, it's your competitive advantage. The very thing you think is holding you back is actually positioning you to develop capacities that people with support never access. Here's what Jung observed. People with external support develop external dependencies. They learn to check with others before deciding. They need validation before acting. They require approval before changing direction. They become psychologically reliant on support structures that, while helpful in the short term, prevent them from developing autonomous strength. But people forced to move forward alone develop what Jung called psychological self-sufficiency, the ability to validate their own direction, trust their own judgment, and sustain their own motivation without external input. This capacity is rare and powerful. It means you can't be stopped by others' disapproval, derailed by criticism, or paralyzed by lack of validation. One man Jung worked with described his experience. "I started my business with no support. No investors believed in it. My family thought I was being irresponsible. My friends said I was delusional. For 3 years, I had only my own conviction that this would work. It was hell. But I developed something my competitors with funding never did: complete autonomy. When they doubt themselves and need their investors' approval, I just kept moving. When they'd adjust their vision to please others, I stayed true to mine. My isolation forced me to develop unshakable internal direction. That became my advantage. He wasn't lucky or special. He was forced by circumstance to develop what people with support never need to develop, and that capacity to move forward with only internal validation became more valuable than all the external support his competitors had. Jung himself experienced this. His professional isolation after breaking with Freud meant he couldn't rely on institutional validation, peer approval, or conventional success markers. He had to develop complete trust in his own experience and judgment. That autonomy allowed him to explore territories other psychologists wouldn't touch because they needed approval from the establishment Jung had been exiled from. This is your advantage. You're being forced to develop psychological muscles that people with support never build. You're learning to validate your own path, trust your own instincts, sustain your own motivation. These capacities are rare, and once developed, they make you nearly unstoppable. But here's the key. You have to reframe your isolation from disadvantage to training ground. You're not lacking something others have. You're developing something they'll never access. You're not being punished by lack of support. You're being initiated into self-sufficiency. The loneliness isn't your obstacle. It's your advantage, but only if you use it to develop internal resources instead of waiting for external ones. Jung would say, look at your isolation and ask, what is this forcing me to develop that I wouldn't develop if I had support? What internal capacities am I building because I have no external help? How is this solitude making me stronger, more autonomous, more self-reliant? That reframe transforms isolation from tragedy to training. Jung's third strategy for getting ahead alone: transform your pain into power. Every wound, every rejection, every abandonment, every lack of support, these aren't justifications for why you can't succeed. They're the raw material you convert into unstoppable motivation. Most people use their wounds as excuses. I can't succeed because I didn't have supportive parents. I can't get ahead because no one believes in me. I can't achieve my goals because I'm starting from behind. These might be true statements about your circumstances, but Jung would say, true or not, they're useless. They keep you stuck in victimhood instead of moving toward power. Jung discovered something radical. The people who achieve the most extraordinary things are almost always people who transformed profound wounds into fierce motivation. Not despite their wounds, but because of them. They took the pain of what they didn't receive and transmuted it into determination to become what they needed but never had. One woman Jung worked with had been abandoned by both parents. She could have used that wound as permanent excuse for why her life didn't work. Instead, she used it as fuel. She became a therapist who specialized in attachment trauma. She told Jung, I didn't receive the parenting I needed, so I became the parent I needed. I transform my wound into my work. Every client I help heal is me healing the child I was. My wound isn't my excuse. It's my calling. She didn't transcend her wound or heal from it in the way people think of healing. She transformed it into purpose. The pain of not being supported became the fuel that drove her to support others. The abandonment she experienced became the expertise that allowed her to help others through similar wounds. This is Jung's alchemy: wound into gift, pain into power, lack into purpose. You don't heal your wounds by making them go away. You integrate them by transforming them into the very thing that propels you forward. Here's how this works practically. Take the specific support you didn't receive, the encouragement, the guidance, the belief, the resources, and let yourself feel the pain of that absence fully. Don't bypass it or spiritualize it. Feel how much it hurt, how unfair it was, how much easier others had it. Let that pain be real. Then ask Jung's question: How can I become what I needed but never had? Not for others necessarily, but for yourself. If you didn't have a mentor, how can you mentor yourself? If you didn't have encouragement, how can you become your own encourager? If you didn't have resources, how can you develop resourcefulness? This transforms you from victim to creator. You're no longer defined by what you lacked. You're defined by what you created in response to that lack. Your wound becomes your origin story, not your excuse. The pain of not being supported becomes the fuel that drives you to succeed without support, which is a far more powerful narrative than succeeding with support. Jung would also say, your wounds give you access to power that comfortable people never develop. People who had everything handed to them never develop hunger. People who always had support never develop self-reliance. People who were always believed in never develop the internal fire of proving everyone wrong. Your wounds, your isolation, your lack of support, these created hunger in you. Use it. Let it drive you. Every time you want to quit, feel the pain of what you didn't receive and let that pain sharpen into determination. Every time you doubt yourself, remember everyone who didn't believe in you and let that fuel your commitment to proving them wrong, not for their validation, but for your own vindication. This isn't toxic positivity. It's alchemical transformation. You're taking what could destroy you and using it as raw material to build something extraordinary. If you're recognizing this, that you've been waiting for support that will never come, that your isolation could be your advantage, that your wounds could be your fuel, you're ready to stop being a victim and start being a creator. No one is coming to save you. That's not tragedy, that's liberation. Before we explore the final strategies for getting ahead alone, check out our new guide, True Self-Discovery, with 24 practical reflection exercises designed to help you find your way within. Click below to get True Self-Discovery. Let's continue, because these next insights reveal how to access the only guide that never abandons you, and how to act without needing anyone's approval. Jung's fourth strategy: develop a conscious relationship with yourself, the deeper intelligence within you that knows your authentic path. When external guides are absent, your internal guide becomes accessible, but only if you learn to listen to it. Most people never develop this relationship because they're too busy listening to external voices: parents, society, mentors, peers, culture. These voices are so loud that the quiet voice of the self can't be heard. But when you have no external support, those external voices lose their power, and suddenly, in the silence of being alone, the self can finally speak. Jung called this the self with a capital S. Not your ego, not your conscious desires, but the deeper organizing intelligence of your psyche that knows who you're meant to become. It communicates through intuition, dreams, synchronicities, and what Jung called the symbols of transformation, images and ideas that arise from within, unbidden, showing you your next step. But accessing this requires what Jung called active listening to the unconscious, the practice of paying attention to what arises from within rather than what comes from without. When everyone tells you to go one direction, but something in you pulls toward another, that's the self speaking. When a dream shows you an image that won't leave your mind, that's the self communicating. When you feel inexplicably drawn toward a path you can't rationally justify, that's the self guiding. One man described his experience of learning this. After my mentor died, I felt completely lost. I'd always relied on his guidance, but in the silence of his absence, I started noticing other guidance, dreams that showed me solutions, intuitions that proved accurate, a pull toward opportunities that seemed random but led somewhere meaningful. I realized I'd been so focused on external guidance that I'd never developed the relationship with my internal guide. My mentor's death forced me to discover the self's guidance, and it's more reliable than any external mentor because it never dies, never leaves, and knows my path more intimately than anyone outside me could. This is what's available when you're alone. Not the absence of guidance, but access to a deeper guidance that external support would drown out. Your self knows your path. It knows your purpose. It knows your next step. But you've never been quiet enough, alone enough, or desperate enough to hear it until now. Here's Jung's practice for developing this relationship. Create what he called active imagination. Dedicated time to listen to your unconscious. Sit in silence daily. Ask yourself a question about your path. Then wait. Don't think, don't plan, don't force. Just wait and notice what arises. Images, feelings, thoughts, memories, sensations. These are your self's language. Write them down, even if they make no rational sense. Even if they seem random or insignificant, your self speaks in symbols, not logic. A recurring image in your dreams might be showing you your next business move. A persistent feeling might be warning you away from a wrong direction. An intuition you can't justify might be the most important guidance you receive. The more you practice this, the clearer the communication becomes. You develop what Jung called the transcendent function, the ability to bridge conscious and unconscious, ego and self. And once you develop this, you have guidance more reliable than any external mentor, more personal than any generic advice, more available than any support system. You're never truly alone when you have access to yourself. But you can only access it fully when external supports are absent and you're forced to turn inward for guidance. Jung's final strategy: start taking action without waiting for permission, validation, or approval. The people who get ahead without support are those who developed the capacity to act from internal authority alone, not recklessly, but autonomously. Most people are paralyzed by the need for external validation before acting. They need someone to tell them their idea is good, their plan is solid, their direction is right. But when you have no support, no one will give you that validation. So you face a choice: stay paralyzed, waiting for approval that never comes, or develop the capacity to act on your own authority. Jung observed that people who achieve extraordinary things almost always had to act before anyone believed in them. They had to start before anyone supported them. They had to persist when everyone doubted them. Not because they were special, but because they developed the capacity to validate their own direction and act on it without external permission. One entrepreneur described this: I pitched my idea to 50 people looking for support, funding, validation. Everyone said no. I could either accept that as the final verdict or decide I didn't need their approval. I chose the latter. I started with zero support, zero funding, zero validation, just my own conviction. 3 years later, some of those same people wanted to invest, but by then, I didn't need them. I'd built the business on my own authority. And that autonomy became more valuable than their money ever could have been. He didn't succeed because he had support. He succeeded because he developed the capacity to act without it. That capacity to trust his own judgment enough to risk everything on it without external validation is what separated him from the thousands who had good ideas but needed approval before acting. Jung called this individuation in action, the courage to pursue your authentic path, even when the collective says you're wrong. Not rebellious action, but autonomous action. Not reckless defiance, but measured movement based on internal conviction rather than external validation. Here's how to develop this. Start small. Take actions that don't require anyone's permission or approval. Don't announce your plans. Just act on them. Don't seek validation. Just take the next step. Don't wait for support. Just move forward with what you have. Each small action without approval strengthens your capacity for autonomous movement. As you build this capacity, the actions can get bigger. You'll find yourself able to make significant life changes without needing anyone's blessing. Career shifts without your family's approval. Business launches without investors' validation. Life directions without your community's understanding. You'll develop what Jung called the courage of self-authorship, the ability to write your own story, even when everyone else thinks you're writing it wrong. This doesn't mean ignoring all feedback or becoming arrogant. It means developing the discernment to know when feedback is genuinely helpful versus when it's others' fear projected onto you. It means trusting yourself enough to act on your own judgment while remaining open to course correction. It means moving forward with internal conviction while accepting that you might be wrong, but choosing your own mistakes over others' safe paths. The people who get ahead without support are those who stopped waiting for permission and started acting on their own authority. Not perfectly, not without doubt, but consistently. They chose their own uncertain path over others' approved mediocrity. And that choice, repeated daily, is what creates extraordinary outcomes. Let me bring this together. Stop waiting for support that will never come. The support appears after success, not before. Your isolation is your advantage. It's forcing you to develop self-sufficiency that supported people never access. Use your wounds as fuel. Transform the pain of what you lacked into motivation to become what you needed. The self is your reliable guide. Develop the relationship with your internal wisdom that external mentors would drown out. And act without approval. Move forward on your own authority instead of waiting for permission. Jung would say, "You're not disadvantaged by having no support. You're in the perfect conditions to develop something more powerful than external support. Internal authority." The people with mentors, funding, and community often achieve less because they never had to develop self-reliance. You're being forced to develop it. And once developed, it's permanent. Your isolation isn't evidence that you're unworthy of support. It's evidence that your path requires a level of autonomy that external support would prevent. You're being forged into someone who doesn't need support to succeed. And that makes you rare and powerful in a world where most people are externally dependent. This doesn't mean you won't ever have support. It means you're learning to succeed without needing it. And once you can succeed alone, support becomes optional rather than necessary. That's true power. If you're trying to get ahead with no one there for you, Jung would tell you, this is your advantage disguised as disadvantage. You're developing capacities that supported people will never access. You're being initiated into a level of self-reliance that's rare and valuable. You're learning to succeed on your own terms, with your own resources, from your own authority. Stop waiting for the support. Stop resenting your isolation. Stop using your wounds as excuses. Start recognizing that everything you think is holding you back is actually positioning you for extraordinary success. If you use it right, your isolation is forcing you to develop internal resources. Use it. Your wounds are giving you fuel and purpose. Transform them. Your lack of external guidance is making space for internal wisdom. Listen to it. Your need to act without approval is building autonomy. Develop it. You're not behind because you're starting alone. You're ahead because you're being forced to develop what others never will. The question isn't, how do I succeed without support? It's, how do I use this isolation to become unstoppable? Jung's answer, Stop waiting, start moving, trust yourself, and act on your own authority. The support you think you need doesn't exist. The power you actually need is inside you, waiting to be accessed through the very isolation you're resenting. You're not alone, you're autonomous, and autonomy is the ultimate advantage. If you're building something with no one there for you, if you're moving forward in isolation, if you're learning to be your own support system, subscribe to this channel. To dive even deeper into Jung's revolutionary psychology and what it means for your spiritual awakening, click the recommended video on your screen now.